Okay, Councillor Haslam, would you now like to speak to your item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the 24th of May 2017, Council adopted the Statement on the Management of Central Highlands Forests, which called on the Victorian Government to phase out current native timber harvesting activities in the Central Highland forests within the Murrumbidgee Shire, and in particular to cease harvesting in the Rubicon Valley, pending resolution of the best approach for the future protection and use of these unique areas, and invest now to assist in industry transition and ensure that communities reliant on timber harvesting can continue to be part of a thriving economy in the future, including transition to alternatives, plantation-based timber supply. Since 2017, the state government has announced the phasing out of native timber harvesting by 2030. However, logging in the Central Highlands has increased through the Rubicon Valley and now is being conducted in the Snobs Creek area, with logging trucks using Snobs Creek Road as a major access to the logging coops. The road has been broken up and dust covers the trees alongside the creek. Of immediate concern is the planned logging of coops between the Snobs Creek catchment. The coops are Dry Cleaner, Gulmarg, Laundry, Dry Spell, Hills Hoist, Kinnabaloo, Curious George and Washboard. Vic Forest is about to commence logging of unique, old and mixed species forests in these coops at Snobs Creek from the 28th of February 2021. If the logging is allowed to proceed, tourist trails through pristine forest will be destroyed. Pollution of Snobs Creek from the logging will threaten the viability of the Snobs Creek trout hatchery, and the increased dust from the destruction of Snobs Creek Road will further pollute the creek and render the formerly popular Snobs Creek Falls unviable as a tourist attraction. I would like to move the motion that Council, as a matter of urgency, contact Vic Forest to request logging in Snobs Creek cease immediately. The coops concerned are Dry Cleaner, Gulmarg, Laundry, Dry Spell, Hills Hoist, Kinnabaloo, Curious George and Washboard. Due to concerns about adverse environmental and tourism impacts of the logging. Send a copy of this request to the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, also our local members of Parliament. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there someone willing to second that motion? Councillor Lording. Councillor Haslam, would you like to speak to the motion now?
Nowhere else in Murrumbidgee Shire has this unique mix of old species forests that survived the 1939 and other subsequent fires. Irreversible damage on the environment which compounds the effect on climate change. Tourism and recreation will be heavily impacted if not destroyed. Cease logging in Dry Cleaner, Gulmarg, Laundry, Dry Spell, Hills Hoist, Kinnabaloo, Curious George and Washboard coops. We're not asking for all logging to stop, only the previously mentioned. We hope future generations will be able to experience the unique, pristine, natural beauty we are so lucky to have as our backyard. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot who seconded. Councillor Lording, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. The logging has been causing me a great deal of concern for an awful long time. I'm a farmer here, and I've noticed that rainfall seems to be rather erratic, and I just hope it's not from deforestation. I fly around a fair bit, and going over the ranges, they're really being decimated in our area, and we get very little economic benefit for that. This particular area that Councillor Haslam is talking about is a very diverse area. It's not just mountain ash, it's lots of different trees, and therefore lots and lots of different fauna, you name it. Mosquitoes even live there. So I would really like, just if we could possibly stop logging in this area, which is scheduled very soon, until we've had a good chance to talk to Vic Forests and ministers and other things to see if we can have this area bypassed. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I want to thank the members of the community across the Shire who have brought this issue to our notice. I also want to thank Councillor Haslam for her work in bringing the motion to the table. I support the motion. Last Friday, I visited Snobs Creek Falls and was dismayed at the state of the area. The dust churned up by the logging trucks on the broken up road has spread across everything. Formerly lush green foliage was a sea of grey. Moss-covered banks had been transformed into walls of grey sludge. Holding the handrail on the grey mud-covered steps resulted in hands covered in grit and grime. Any rain would wash all the muck into Snobs Creek and onwards to the trout hatchery, originally established to take advantage of the formerly crystal clear waters. While travelling through the coops marked for logging, the experience at the falls showed how little protection would be provided by the proposed buffers between the coops and the creek. There would only be a veneer of vegetation, a facade of a forest. The rest would be gone. No longer a pristine area that could be enjoyed. No longer a tourist attraction. Environmentally, a travesty. The operations to date have necessitated Council flagging $750,000 to upgrade and repair its section of Snobs Creek Road. DELP are also trying to raise more funds to repair the road and parking area to reduce the dust around the Snobs Creek Falls. Combined, that's nearly $1 million, which, if the logging was stopped, would be a great investment to bring tourism back to the falls. If logging continues, it will literally be money down the creek. The Local Government Act directs all councils to have the mitigation and planning for climate change risks as an overarching governance principle. We are directed to act, and act we must. We can no longer state a principle and leave it at that. We have to follow through, especially when we see threats to climate change mitigation, such as the proposed destruction of this pristine area. The state government has said that logging of native forests will cease by 2030, with timber production moving to being plantation-based. Even if current harvesting rates were reduced to allow the industry to continue in our shire until that date, and provided we have no more fires in our forests, unfortunately, we are now too late for a steady, phased transfer of jobs from native timber harvesting into plantation. We'll in fact need all the jobs we can develop in every other area, especially in tourism. If we don't start preserving all our ecotourism assets now, then come 2030, there will be no forests, no timber jobs, and no tourism to take up the slack. We must do all we can to stop the coops around Snobs Creek from being logged, and I feel that this motion is a good start to that end. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other councillor wishing to talk? Councillor Gallagher.
Madam Mayor, like Councillor Haslam, I do not support an immediate cessation of logging in the Murrumbidgee Shire. Many members of our community rely on the sector for employment and for economic benefits which flow to businesses and the families of our region. I do support a transition to a plantation timber supply, and I believe this council has a duty to advocate for community members to ensure that there is a viable alternative future for timber industry workers, machine operators and haulage contractors. There are many and complex aspects to this industry, and so it is essential for this council to consult widely with Vic Forest, with affected timber industry representatives and with community members as a complete and concise policy framework and advocacy plan is established. Alexandra is considered by many still a timber town. Nevertheless, this urgent motion, which effectively calls for a moratorium on clear felling in a collection of coops upstream of the Snob Creek Falls, serves to preserve an area of mixed species timber and wetlands in a temperate forest which I'm informed has survived fires of the last century. I'm further informed that this is the last remaining area in Murrumbidgee Shire with this diverse and maturity of timber cover. I note that the land in question is not Murrumbidgee Shire land, but rather Rubicon State Forest, and that the motion is one of advocacy, to request that the state authority act to discontinue clear felling in this part of the forest. The Local Government Act 2020 is a principle-based framework, as Councillor Walsh outlined, under which this council functions. It's rather inflexible in the manner in which it directs councillors to act in the interest of the entire community in consideration of climate change impacts and with a view to the interest of future generations. These are not hints or tips, but rather clear directives. And for these reasons, for this specific parcel of land, I'll support the motion.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Before we close, I'd like to just make a comment. I will be voting in favour of this motion in order for Council to advocate for protection of this particular fragile landscape. However, having been involved in the development of the statement on the management of the Central Highlands Forest in 2017, I understand the heartache this causes for some families whose lives have been built around the logging industry, and I am mindful of the angst that this current motion may cause some community members at this time. I do not make this decision lightly, and I will be looking at all opportunities to ensure that I and my fellow councillors are fully briefed from all relevant parties. Conversations from all representatives from all interested groups and departments will be actively encouraged. I continue to support the statement principles of supporting families in our community by investment to assist in the industry transition and ensure that our communities reliant on timber harvesting can continue to be part of a thriving economy into the future, including transition to alternative plantation-based timber supply. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Haslam, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, close.
I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Motion carried. Thank you.